Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's WebEx presentation from AARP ElderWatch. Today's presentation is an update from the Colorado Attorney General's Office. Thank you so much for being here today. I am very happy to be joined by my buddy, Jan Zabislin from the Colorado Attorney General's Office. Jan is a great friend of ElderWatch and one of the people who got the program started almost 20 years ago. So welcome, Jan. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Mark. I'm always glad to join you and anybody else who participates.
Fantastic. And you know, unfortunately, we haven't been able to see Jan as much as normal in person, but we're happy to have him here virtually. And today we're recording the presentation so other people can view it at their leisure as well. Jan, will you tell us a little bit about the consumer protection section of the Colorado Attorney General's Office?
Yeah, sure, Mark. I think people would be surprised to learn first that we are not a very big section. The Attorney General's Office has around 400 or 450 employees, but consumer protection, including attorneys, investigators, paralegals, administrative help, is only about 65 people total, and that's to cover the entire state of Colorado. And it's not all just consumer fraud. Some of it's antitrust. Some of it's consumer credit because we license debt collectors, we license small dollar lenders, and the like. So yeah, small group, but we have some very powerful statutes, both state and federal, that we enforce to try to protect consumers.
Excellent. And so in your role within the Attorney General's Office, what do you mostly do?
Well, I've been there 32 years, and I've had a lot of different roles. Primarily, I have worked in antitrust and consumer fraud. I have prosecuted a large number of companies over these 32 years who've engaged in fraudulent advertising or sales practices. So it really runs the gamut. So right now, I do a lot of work on sort of legislative policy issues. I do a lot of work on consumer education and outreach through programs like AARP ElderWatch. But I'm still pretty active in some investigations and litigation.
So if you say you worked there for 32 years, you started at the AG's office when you were 10 or 15?
Yeah,
pretty much.
More than double that, I'm afraid.
So when you've worked with a lot of different attorney generals, and right now the Colorado Attorney General is Phil Weiser. Can you tell me a little bit about some of Attorney General Weiser's priorities in terms of the work that you all are doing in the office right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So Phil Weiser was elected almost 2 years ago, so he's finishing his second year right now, and has been a great friend of consumer protection. He has empowered us to do a bunch of cases already, and investigations are underway. He has embraced the ElderWatch program and our relationship with the AARP, both nationally and Colorado. So it's been a high priority for him. He's taking a look right now at some issues that have been around for a while, haven't gotten as much attention maybe as they should. One is involved what we call negative option contracting. And the listeners may not understand that term, but they'll understand this one. So you go online, you're solicited to buy a product as a free trial offer. And all you do is pay shipping and handling. And it's usually health supplements, dietary supplements, beauty aids, et cetera, et cetera. So you sign up thinking, well, $4.50 in shipping, I'll take a free sample for that. And before they know it, they're sitting on a box of this stuff. They're being charged $200 for a product they never ordered. And they're having a heck of a time getting out from underneath these contracts. They can't figure out where to send a cancellation request, how to request a refund. So we've taken a look and are really taking a hard look at sort of that kind of negative option contracting or solicitations in Colorado.
I think that's critically important because on the ElderWatch helpline, we definitely do hear about those types of issues, particularly, and I make jokes about it sometimes, but it seems like they're always have to do with wrinkle creams. And so I really tell people, it's like avoid those wrinkle creams that where you pay $2.99 for shipping and then you end up with a pile of it that doesn't work later on. I think it's really great that you all are taking a look at that.
Yeah, it's wrinkle cream, it's face creams, it's dietary supplements, it's weight loss. Weight loss is a huge one. You know, the keto diet is the new fad, low carb diet that's out there on the market. And so we have just dozens of companies that are selling keto, in quotes, dietary supplements through these phony free trial offer scams.
Yeah, and I'll tell you that it hasn't been released yet, but AARP recently did a national survey of people and in terms of their knowledge around shopping, particularly around the holidays. And there's a lot of misinformation or lack of information about free trial offers. And I think this is a great opportunity to educate consumers. And so I think it's fantastic that you guys are working on that. And there might be a couple numbers that might be helpful in the work that you're doing in terms of the AARP survey that's going to be released later in November.
Good. Look forward.
What other, current scams is your office seeing trending over the last month?
So, and this is, it's over the last month, it's over the last year, it's over the last 2 years, and that's impostor scams, right? So these are callers that pretend to be usually from some federal government agency, whether it's Social Security Administration, Medicaid and Medicare, IRS, all of these, and the message is, it's a different agency, but the message is always the same. You're in some kind of a trouble, or your account is in some kind of a trouble. And the only way you're going to be able to get out of trouble or to protect your account, let's say it's Social Security, is you've got to provide all of this information about yourself, your birth date, your Social Security numbers, passwords, all kinds of other information. Or they will basically blackmail you, threaten you with prosecution in order for you to send them money in some strange way, prepaid gift cards, Bitcoin, you name it, and they're going to want to do it. So imposter scams are still a number one priority. It's also extremely hard for us to find because so many of these calls are actually routed from out of the country. And so we've been working with our federal partners at the FBI and at the Federal Trade Commission to try to see if there's any way we can identify where some of these calls are even coming from.
Yeah, I'll say those imposter scams, every day we're hearing through the Elder Watch helpline that they are targeting older adults in Colorado as well. They're not even just targeting older adults, they're targeting everyone, it seems like. Lots of younger callers who are telling us they're dealing with those. And, what advice do you have for folks who are getting those calls? What should they be doing?
So a couple of different things. I mean, if you're using a landline phone, have an answering machine turned on and active and screen the calls by not picking up the phone directly and let them go to voicemail. If you recognize the caller, if you're there and you recognize your daughter's voice or your son's voice, you can pick it up. But most of these calls come in through what's called an automated dialing. It's a computer software that just dials out millions of calls in a day. And they get an answering machine or a busy signal, and the computer just hangs up. Now, once in a while, they'll leave a message. But so number one, don't pick up these calls. Number two, if you're using your mobile phone primarily, a cell phone, talk to your provider and find out what kind of anti-blocking services that they may provide. Right now, on my phone, they figured out somehow that something is a telemarketing call. And my phone, instead of showing a phone number, it will say telemarketing call, or it will say suspected spam. So talk to whomever your provider is and see what kind of assistance they can provide you in blocking those. And thirdly, do not ever engage with these people, right? Some people think, I'm going to lead them on. I'm going to see if I can lead them on, waste their time. You just don't know what hook they may have into you that's going to all of a sudden make you drop your guard and agree to send money or give up personal information. So do not engage with these people. If for whatever reason you pick up the phone and somebody starts telling you they're with the FBI or the IRS or Social Security, hang it up. Don't even wait a second. Don't worry about being rude. These guys are trying to rip you off. You just hang up the phone.
Fantastic. That's great advice. I would say, specifically, these guys are really good at what they're doing, and they can be really, really tricky. And so I keep talking with people who really talk about how convincing they can be. And I think, you bring up a good point is just don't even let them have a chance to be convincing, because, Social Security's not calling you, the IRS isn't calling you, Medicare's not calling you. They just don't have the time for that. So some great tips. Yeah, for the holidays, this year has been kind of crazy, and I can't believe that it's already, into November. But can you tell us, a couple of things that consumers should be looking out for specifically as the holidays approach? We have Black Friday coming up and lots of shopping going on in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. What advice do you have for consumers?
Well, I think it's going to be especially important this year because I have a feeling that so many of us are going to be doing online shopping either for the first time or certainly at levels that we've never done it before, just because of the fear of being in a crowded shopping mall or shopping center. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're very careful about the sites that you visit, that you're not responding to an unsolicited email or pop-up advertisement or text message for some incredible deal, right? Huge savings on a big appliance or whatever it may be. If it is an unsolicited message to you in whatever form, be immediately suspicious. So do your homework. If you're looking for specific items, you can go to comparison sites. You can look for reviews online. You can do a lot of preparation before you actually go and buy a product to see whether or not a particular website is legitimate, to see whether or not the price or the product is being offered is legitimate, if it's of high quality, if it's what you're looking for. And then make sure that when you go to a site to purchase anything, that it is a secure website. And there's a couple of ways that you can see that. Up at the address line, up at the very top of your screen, where you usually have the website address, if it says HTTPS, so those 5 letters, HTTPS, that means it's a secure site, and all of the information that you provide them will be encrypted. You will also be able to see in some sites a small gold or green padlock, and it's usually down in the bottom right-hand corner of most websites, but it also may appear in the address bar. So those are 2 things that should immediately tell you that this is a secure website. If you're clicking on links to get to a site, before you actually click through, hover your mouse over that link and see whether or not the link shows up as what you think it is. So you see this with phishing, where people try to, oh, I'm your bank and there's a problem with your account. Here, click on this, Bank of America link, and you hover over it, and it doesn't say bankofamerica.com or whatever their URL is. It may say, Bobby's Pizza 42856 whatever. So, check and make sure you're going to the site that you want. As a general rule, I discourage people from clicking through links that they receive in emails, text messages, or pop-up ads. You just don't have any confidence or trust that they're taking you to the right place.
That's some great advice around shopping. And I'll say that one other thing that I've experienced recently is that there are a lot of ads that are popping up on social media that are, that don't deliver as promised. So I would say be very careful about retailers that you're finding on social media as well. There's lots of options now because people are spending lots of time online, and Janet gave some great tips for people who are online, but and looking for websites. I would just say use that same caution on social media, whether you're on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or any of those platforms, because scammers are using those platforms to try and find people who are looking for good deals. And I found a deal that was too good to be true. I took all the same precautions that I normally do, but went through and purchased it. Ultimately disputed with my credit card and received the funds back. But it was something I was willing to take a risk on, and so I should have probably not done that, just knowing that it was the sale was too good to be true. But it was just something I wanted to try out and see. I don't know, Jan, if you have any other advice on that.
No, I certainly echo the cautionary tale about social media. I know that I saw a study, I don't know, a year or two ago that just the huge number of Facebook pages that were imposter pages, right? That they were just dummy pages. They were there to try to convince you that they were somebody else. And I know they work very hard, whether it's Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, to try to manage that. But it's too easy to create identities on these sites, and there's just so many of them that it's very hard for them to catch. So again, it's like any other purchase that you're going to make. Do your homework in advance and check it out and be in charge of that transaction, so that you're not clicking a link to go buy a product. You're searching online for where that product is available and whether or not that is a reputable business. So you can look at the Better Business Bureau. You can go to online review forums to see whether or not other consumers are having trouble.
Excellent advice. And for those of you who joined us maybe a little bit late, we're talking here with Jan Zvislim from the Colorado Attorney General's office. He's a consumer protection expert who's been working on this stuff for over 30 years. So if you have any questions, please type them in the chat box and I will pose them to Jan during this session. Jan, a couple more questions that I have for you specifically. You've been doing this work around educating older adults and older Coloradans about fraud for a long time. Are there specific scams that you think that are really being targeted towards older adults, and what should this population be looking out for?
So, that's a very hard question because we have a couple of problems with older adults, although that's changing pretty dramatically. As sort of new generations of people hit retirement age and older. It used to be, let's be honest, when I started in the Attorney General's office, nobody had a computer, right? Nobody had a cell phone. The internet didn't exist, right? And so these scams were via telephone or direct mail or door-to-door. And a lot of times it was the same kind of scam, right? It was just done more in person. And now with cell phones and computers and social networks, it can be pretty anonymous, and it's very hard to figure out who that is. But the other issue has been that older adults, as a group, and this becomes increasingly true the older the adult is, don't file complaints with federal or state law enforcement officials. And so it's not that they're not being victimized. It is either they aren't aware that there's a place that they can file a complaint, like at stopfraudcolorado.gov that you can see on the screen, or with your local district attorney or local police or sheriff's department, or that there's great federal offices, Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov is a great mechanism for filing a consumer complaint, as well as a lot of information about that. So I think that a lot of the imposter scams, especially those involving Social Security and Medicare, are very specifically targeting older Coloradans. And you've got to ask yourself, well, how do they know? How do they figure this out? Well, we're long past the day where we have any privacy in the world, right? I mean, we all have online shopped. We all have a driver's license. We've all registered to vote, or we've all bought property. And all of those things become public record. And so data is collected on us about everything that we do. So it is easy for a scammer to buy a list of, let's say I want to buy a list of Coloradans on Medicare over the age of 70, and they could buy that list. And they're going to have email addresses, they're going to have phone numbers, so they're going to be able to specifically target you. That's why you've got to be very careful about believing anything that comes in an unsolicited phone call, text message, or email.
Yeah, great advice. And we're seeing those, those scams that you've been talking about, that you've been seeing, from the start of your career, you're still seeing variations of them, aren't you?
Yeah, we do. It was, telemarketing. It was all phony charities and phony products and products that are really valuable, but we're going to give them to you really cheap, right? It's just bait and switch stuff. It's been around for not just my 32 years in the office, but probably for 300 years. As we had snake oil salesmen off the back of a covered wagon. There are people who know no other way to make money than to rip other people off. And it hasn't changed. In fact, it's just become easier for them to do it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. I thought you might be able to comment on a recent news story that came out. There was a news story with regard to the Department of Justice and a case around magazine subscription issues. Can you talk a little bit? I know the Attorney General's office, Colorado Attorney General's office, has been involved in that case, involved in going after some of these bad actors with regard to magazine sales. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that is a very interesting one. So this was filed about 3 weeks ago by the U.S. Attorney in Minnesota, and it named just dozens and dozens of individuals and companies that were using primarily telemarketing methods to sell fake magazine subscriptions to consumers all over the country. And they were disproportionately older adults in Colorado and everywhere. What we found particularly gratifying about that filing is that 3 of the defendants in that federal criminal case were individuals that our office sued back in 2011 for engaging in the same conduct here in Colorado. And we shut them down. We got multi-million-dollar judgments against them. And unfortunately, as a state law enforcement office, we can only handle what takes place in the state of Colorado, whether the business is located here or if the victims are. So even though these guys had an injunction against them and huge multi-million-dollar damages, civil penalties, they just picked up and moved out of state. And they moved to Texas and then to Arizona, and they continued the exact same conduct in those other states. Well, finally, a group of federal prosecutors, again, through the Minnesota U.S. Attorney's Office, shut down, just dozens and dozens of these businesses. I think they estimated in the criminal complaint that they had made in excess of $300 million in phony magazine charges over the last 10 years. And the criminal case, the criminal filing specifically mentions the Colorado case that we did in 2011.
Yeah, that was fantastic to see, and I know that you guys had been heavily involved with that, so I appreciate, and we appreciate the work that your office has done with regards to getting after those guys, because it's still something that we hear complaints about from time to time, but hopefully fewer complaints, especially now. Right. Fingers crossed.
Well, we have a case pending in Boulder District Court right now against a company that was doing direct mail magazine sales and solicitations, a company called Atlantic Publishers Group. And it's got a whole bunch of related sister companies. And they were sending out what looked like invoices for renewing a magazine subscription, when in fact they were just trying to con you out of paying an exorbitant amount of money for a subscription that you already have. So we sued them. And that case is, as I said, that lawsuit is still pending.
Interesting. Yeah, it's a space, and there's some people who think, are magazines even still existent, because there's so many people who are getting their information online, but they are, and these guys are still bad. There's still plenty of bad actors out there, so it's still using that space.
We had lots and lots of complaints from older Coloradans and older adults around the country, and they would start off with saying, I have gotten People magazine for 35 years. I've got National Geographic, or, name the magazine. And so these are people that grew up with magazines in their house and continued subscriptions. They like having them around. They like reading them. And even though a lot of them are kind of either going out of business or going online, there's still a marketplace for magazine sales. And so, they were the way this scam worked is people were used to getting an annual letter or card from their magazine company saying, do you want to renew your subscription? Well, these guys figured out a way to sort of step into the middle of all of that with their own solicitation that looked like it was an official notice of renewal. And so they got people to spend hundreds of dollars on ongoing subscriptions for many times the amount they would have paid had they gone directly to the publisher.
Yeah, well, and you bring up a great point. I mean, you able to generate these cases off of reports that people make to your office.
Yeah.
Can you talk just a little bit more about reporting and why people should report to your office and how they can report to your office?
Yeah, it's really one of the most important things that we can do as citizens is to not only just report for ourselves, but report for our communities. As law enforcement, we don't know what's necessarily happening out there. We don't know what telephone calls are being made, what direct mail is coming into your homes, what websites you're visiting. So if you either have become a victim or think you have, or you're just suspicious about, a text message, a phone call, an advertisement, when you file a complaint with us, it gives us information to start, looking to see whether or not, we get enough of these complaints to prioritize amongst our small staff so that we take action. Now, we're not allowed to represent individual consumers in our office because our client is the state of Colorado. And we don't have the resources to investigate every single complaint that comes in, and we get 8 to 10, even 12,000 written complaints a year. But the way that we're able to prioritize our resources is through this ongoing process that we have where we look at and review every single complaint that comes in, and we look for patterns, we look for trends, we look for common business names, common individuals to see whether or not we've got a big enough problem that we want to take action. That's exactly how Atlantic Publishers Group came in. Almost none of the complaints in that case were from Colorado consumers, but because they had a Colorado address, that a lot of those complaints came to us. And we identified where they were operating out of Colorado, and they're also operating out of California and Arizona and Wyoming and a few other places. That's how we were able to do it. So you can go to the stopfraudcolorado.gov website that you see on the screen in front of you. And in the upper right-hand corner, there's a report button. And you can do it very simply. Tell us your story is one option. You can file a formal complaint that way and attach documents, although I urge people to not send us copies of your bank statements and other really personal identifying information. If we need to follow up with you to collect that information, we'll do that. So that's the best way to do it. You can also do that through the Attorney General's website, which is COAG for Colorado Attorney General.gov. And you'll see that they have a report feature as well so that you can file a complaint with us. And then there's also that you can call the 800 number on the screen, 800-222-4444. Option 2 gets you to ElderWatch, and they have volunteers that will take your complaint or listen to your stories or give you advice. Or you can pick another option on that same line and talk to a complaint specialist in our office. And we have complaint specialists that are Spanish-speaking as well as English-speaking.
Excellent. Well, Jan, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank everyone else who listened in. And again, this program will be recorded, so if you want to share it with friends or family members, that would be fantastic. Again, Jan just listed it, but if you have a question about a fraud or scam and want to call the Colorado Attorney General's Consumer Complaint Line, the number on the screen is 1-800-222-4444, and we'd be happy to chat with you then. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Jan.